Debt is a scary word and usually a topic that most of us prefer to sweep under the rug, but the hard truth is the majority of Canadians live with debt hanging over their heads. But that doesn't always have to be the case. We are connecting now with author Meghan Cosenzo, author of Getting Back to Zero. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, I just mentioned it. Debt is one of those uncomfortable conversations that we don't really love to have. Now, you didn't just write a book about getting debt free, you actually lived the experience. So can you talk to me a bit about your personal journey?
Sure. Basically, I had a company that was online. I was also in the film industry, and I still am. But what happened was the film industry in Regina kind of died. And I ended up finding myself trying to rely on my business, which was more at the time a hobby. And I just accumulated a whole bunch of debt. And then I found myself, it was around 120,000 into debt. And it was a hard truth because I felt like I was living this secret life. I didn't even tell my family or my spouse at the time. It was like my hidden life that I tried to just continue to get let go of. And so the book is really about my journey, being aware, like, hey, this is something that I created. This is my responsibility. And how do I go from having all this debt to getting back to zero? Because it really felt like it was all I was. Do you know what I mean? Like it was.
You're defining you in that moment, right? Yeah. And there's
exactly.
a lot of stigma around sharing about your debt. But the truth is, most of us do have debt. So this led to you publishing your most recent book. How's the book set up? You said it's part of your personal journey, but is there a guide for people?
There will be a guide that's coming out, but basically I laid out each chapter. So it goes from like 2006 to 2020. So I paid it off last year. And then each chapter ends with a thought-provoking question. So things that I went through in the chapter, I'm like, okay, think about yourself, think about where you are at now, and how does that lay out, and where do you want to be going forward. So each chapter kind of invokes people to think about their own personal journey, so then they can kind of follow along with me as I get through mine. And yeah, there's a guide coming out later.
Right. Talk to me about that guide, because it's going to have some action, some movement to it, maybe getting people moving who are afraid to kind of tackle those numbers.
Yes, my story was more like an inspirational story, motivational story for people to get like going or maybe shift some thinking. But the guide is actually like a laid out plan. So it makes you think about your actual financial picture, your income, your expenses, and how do you really get back to zero? And then looking at, once you get back to zero, what are your goals? What is your vision for your life?
Right. And you know what I love about this too is you're not saying it's going to happen in a year. I mean, if I'm here in 2006 to 2020, that's 14 years, right? So let's pull up a board here. You gave me some quick tips. I asked if you had some that you would share with us. Talk us through it.
Sure. Basically, you look at your financial picture honestly. So where are you currently? Where is all the money laying or owed? And then you want to get a support system. So that's one thing that I didn't do. I didn't ask for help and until it was a little too late. And I did have a support system after that, but it's really important to really be honest with at least one person, being like, hey, this is where I am and it's unfortunate, but I want to do something about it. And then you create a plan and you create a budget and you follow through. And you let go of expenses that you might have that you don't necessarily need, and you live super basic and simple with your means. And then you really keep your eye on the prize. Like, where do you want to go from here? If your debt shouldn't define you, what do you really want to do with your life?
And it looks like we might have lost Meghan, but of course you can pick up her book. Many retailers have it available. It's called Getting Back to Zero, and that action guide is coming out very soon. A big thank you to Meghan.